Leadership on Demand, TM Hyman, with a very special guest. All of the guests are special on this particular podcast. But this one, absolutely. She is the jack of all trades. I mean, one, she's an engineer by trade, right? I know she talks about Toastmasters a lot. A technologist, we'll talk about that. An ideapreneur. And listen, she's everything as it relates to Breakfast with Champions, the Millionaire Breakfast Club. Dora Maria Abreu.
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 You just
Abreu.
added a T.
And I practiced it before we started. Abreu. Abreu. And so
Yeah.
I couldn't pronounce it. I asked you to help me because I knew it didn't look like it sounded. And then I learned something that you're clearly a Spanish queen, but your name is Portuguese.
Look, I wasn't around when they were jumping from like island to island back in those days, but I thought that my last name was only from the Dominican Republic until I went to college and I ran into somebody with my last name and I'm like, oh, you're Dominican. They're like, no, I'm Venezuelan. And I'm like, Venezuela? Where the hell did you get my last name from? Did somebody go over there? And he's like, no, it is there. Like, that's one of the last names of that town or whatever. And then I was like, oh, okay. And then I met some other friend of mine that was from Cuba. I'm like, what is going on with this last name? And so I did Google it because back in those days, it wasn't really Google, but I was doing, they had these like little chats, like genealogy chats and stuff. So I started like getting into some of those chats and figuring it out. And in Brazil, there's 1 million people with my last name. So I'm like, okay, this is getting really difficult to figure out. And then when I did 23andMe, that's when I was like, oh, so I guess that last name is not from the Dominican Republic. It's from Portugal. Okay. Narrow that down. So it was comical.
Dora Maria Abreu.
Abreu.
Welcome to
Thank you.
Leadership on Demand. Listen, you are a gem. For people who do not know, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and then I'll come back. Tell us a little bit about who you are, coming live out of New York City.
So for me, I'll just keep it simple. I'm an eclectic engineer. I'm a technology person since I was very young. I grew up in a shop. I'm first generation in this country. I learned Spanish first because I didn't, no one in my house knew English. We all learned English together. We learned it with Sesame Street. We learned to go into school. Like we all did all the things together when it came to learning this American culture. And so I just grew up in that whole environment of always helping those around me, being that walking translator, literally synchronously doing it because it was just like my grandmother would be like telling her neighbor, oh, one of my grandkids will translate for you. And she would lend us to them like, oh, go help her. And I'm like, grandma, like, what do you want me to do here? Just go translate for her. I'm like, okay. So we were like the walking translators of like the neighborhood. And so I always grew up with that sense of just giving back. So I just literally embarked on that journey as I went through high school and college and just doing things to always like give back especially when it came to the youth, because a lot of times us growing up, we didn't know a lot of things because my parents didn't know. And, you know, I had strict parents. We weren't really allowed outside. That's why we broke a lot of things inside the house playing baseball and soccer. But at the end of the day, I also understood that it was important to share the knowledge that we had. So that's what I embarked on that path.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I heard you say family, helper, giving back. Those are extremely important things that certainly resonate with me. I'm from a large family, right? My mom was one of 9 kids. I'm the oldest of 6 kids, right? And so I think it's a reflex, right, to be a helper. I can absolutely relate. You have shared some very interesting stories about your childhood, adversity, those type of things. But one, I want to call out your occupation. Your occupation, right? This is a leadership podcast, and you demonstrate dynamic leadership skills. But as an engineer, a female engineer, right? What caused you to go down that path? And what has that journey been like as a minority female in a Caucasian dominated industry? Caucasian male
Asian male.
dominated industry. Let's not leave that out.
Oh my goodness. I guess I have to thank my dad. I grew up in a shop. I'm girl number 3, so they were expecting the boy. I came out of the hospital dressed in blue. Like, they really did not expect me. Like, it was just one of those things where it was just like, we're having a boy now. We have enough girls. And so as I was growing up, and by the way, I have brothers that came after me, but as I was growing up, it was always like, oh, you can't do that. Why? Because you're a girl. And it was just like 5 minutes later, here you go. Like, just to prove my point. And my whole life, it was my dad and even my brothers chiming in like, oh, you can't do that. Why? Because you're a girl. So it was just like me proving them wrong every time.
Yeah.
But I'm like one of those things, like even now, like there was one of those phone plugs that didn't work in my brother's car. And I'm like, oh, can I see the plug? Because I wanted to take it apart. I wanted to know why it wasn't working. And he was like, no, I don't need to know why. I'm just going to get another one. I'm like, oh, but I want to know why. And it just, as I was growing up, I was that kid that took things apart. Like my father didn't have to worry about my brothers doing it because I was doing it. And I just made sure that everything was back together again before my dad got home from work, because otherwise I'd get in trouble. So it was just one of those things that I was always attracted to. That curiosity just always dominated. Like, oh, I wonder why that works or how that works. And I would take things apart and play around like, oh, so if this wasn't connected to this wouldn't even work. And so I would be that person that like amplified all of our little radio. Like, we had little radios that were like shaped like bugs. Like, I got a ladybug. Somebody else got like the caterpillar. Well, anyway, I was the kid that took them all apart and kind of rewired them to make them sound really loud. And so that's how I ended up in this path of like the tech space. So
how challenging has it been? Or how easy has it been? When you made the decision, we've identified that it is absolutely, Caucasian male dominated. How challenging has the experience been to be competitive?
To be honest with you, it always depended on the person. Like, I've had tremendous managers that were allies, that were like people that saw my potential and just kept feeding it. And then I had managers that totally were just like, oh yeah, she's just a wheel, like just a wheel here to get things moving in the right direction, not someone who's going to be contributing. So they didn't acknowledge my depth of knowledge. They didn't take into account that I actually knew things. And even other people, like other women that were white females, like that seat is mine. Like, you're not taking that seat. Right. And so when it came to the work was great because I thrived on that. I enjoy working in the tech space. But for me to have to manage the people side, I'm like, TM, there's no reboot button for people. You can't reboot them. You can reboot technology. You can start it over. You can take it apart. You can put it back together, like all of the things. But you cannot do that with people. Yeah. And then managing that, I'm an introvert, so I find it hard unless I know you, like to open up to you. So here it is. There's no relationship, and I'm here dealing with someone that doesn't want me there. So that's a hard journey to navigate. And when I have left jobs, I've left the person, that manager, that team, that group. It wasn't that I left what I was doing because I loved what I was doing, but I didn't love the people. Yeah. So I ended up departing from some of those roles because of that. I'm like, you know what? I didn't buy my degree. I actually earned it. So, and being in a class, like even in one of my college classes, like I had a TA and it was only 2 females in this physics lab. I have never worked so hard for a 1-credit lab in my life. But that lab, he just humiliated us. It was just me and this other girl, and we were going through the lab, and both of us worked when we went to college. So we were both like, we got to make this work in an hour. So let's get to it. Right. And he would come over and say, guys, come over. Let's check this out. The girls are done. Let's see what they did. Every lab was like that. And it was so embarrassing. Like, I'm like, oh my God, we can't get this wrong. Like, I would be doing so much research before I got to that lab to ensure that whatever lab came up, we would be able to handle it and get it at least 90% or 80% right. Yeah. But yeah, otherwise it was just that whole, let me prove you wrong because you got this picture wrong. You know that we are more than deserving to be in this lab, in this table. And so proving them wrong became like a mission when I was in that lab class. Like, I gotta make sure that they know like we're to be reckoned with.
Because I think think many of us are on a "I'll prove you wrong" type of mission, right? Specifically for those who have been discounted, right? I mean, they bet against us at the end of the day. You're doing too much. Just go sit down. Why don't you just try to be regular, right? Just go be average, be an average.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, listen, you're average. I'm not doing too much. Maybe you're not doing enough. You talked about allies. You talked about striving for roles that other people are lobbying for, right? Because they think they're better. I think many of us who are minorities, we've always had to do just a little bit more just to get half the recognition, right?
Mhm.
Um, how have you gone about managing allies, managing mentors, managing sponsors in this narrow space of engineering? How difficult is it for you, or how difficult has it been for you to acquire um, those allies, those mentors, those sponsors?
Well, let me tell you, I made a lot of mistakes when I began my career. One, I didn't have a diverse pool of mentors. So
Mm,
the mentors that I had looked like me. And that was my first mistake, because these are people that were my peers. They were at my level,
yes,
and I am getting advice, and which is nothing wrong with that, but it wasn't something that was taking me to that next level, or to open my eyes to, like, hey, you should get a sponsor. Like, they didn't even know I needed a sponsor. So that was like one of the mistakes I did early on. I didn't really diversify that until I got into, and that's one of the activities that I do with youth, is doing an inventory of your network, right? Like, if you're saying that you want to move into this space, who do you know in that space? I
yes.
would do this inventory, and literally every single person I knew was, one, a minority, another person in technology as well. And here I am trying, and nobody was in management, nobody was in project management. Like, when I was trying to get out of software development, it was just like all the people I knew were software developers, literally. And it was just like, wow, like the one person that wasn't, or two that I like spoke with a lot, they were civil engineers. But still, my age, my level, like, or younger. And it was just like, wow, like, yeah, I didn't think that through, did I? And so the other thing was too, that I didn't have, most of the people in my network were males. I hardly had any female friends. Outside of my tech world, I had female friends in other networks that I was involved in. And that's what really saved me. The fact that I was always mentoring youth and doing career days and being involved in my community, that is where I feel really just catapulted me into opening my eyes a lot better, as I, just started navigating this career space. I didn't know about sponsors. I thought you work hard, put your head down, do great work, and
It'll all come
magically the
together.
things would fall into place.
It'll all come together.
And I was just like, yeah, that's sort of not happening here. What's going
Doesn't quite
on?
happen that
Somebody
way.
fill me
Yeah,
in. So
yeah.
it was a wake up call, when I wasn't promoted, and the person who was watching YouTube videos all day was promoted, and I was like, that's a red flag. Like,
Yeah.
I have a global role. This person has a local role. My depth of knowledge, I'm an SME on various things. This person's not. And so I was like, wow. So they rather promote someone that has a less depth of even capacity than I do, and really isn't doing anything grandiose for the team, for the group, for the department, nothing. Like, it wasn't like this person was not a rock star, but yet they promoted him because he was part of the old boy network. And I was like, okay. So I told my manager, I was like, look, I've been up for promotion for the last 5 years. I feel like no one is fighting for me. And that's when someone told me I needed a sponsor to speak my name into the room where no one else was doing that for me. I literally did my own promotion doc. I did my own PowerPoint presentation. Like, I did everything and gave it to my manager because I felt like he wasn't fighting for me. And somebody else still got promoted. So I'm still trying to figure out, how am I being overlooked yet again? And then that's when I started just being very mindful of building my network
Yes.
outside of work as well as inside, so that I can, one, amplify that search of being a sponsor, but a sponsor that's really someone who has decision-making power, not just a
Yes.
sponsor who's a manager in some random team and that has no influence whatsoever, because that's who I am. And so a lot of times you end up getting people who mean the best. They're awesome people,
Mhm.
but they don't have any influence or power in your space. So I ended up still like getting overlooked and things like that. And it just made it was just a very hard reality for me to be like, what do you mean that my hard work doesn't matter? Like, wow, like everything that I bring to the table doesn't matter. Like, it's just because this guy goes out drinking with you, that's the part that matters. And so that was really just it just clashed with my values too. Like,
Yeah.
I was just like, I mean, that's not how we roll here. But I'm like, all right, let's just
So let
keep
me
focused.
let me just share some perspective on that, right? Because I
Hmm.
think many of us feel and have been, right? I don't want
Hmm.
to downplay it by any means. Looked over, right? Stepped
Underestimated.
over, underestimated, right? But I think you said you mentioned the good old boy network. We all
Hmm.
know about that network, and it is real, right? But
Yeah.
what I've realized
Hmm.
is it's also about relationships,
Yeah.
right? And this is something, Dora Maria, that I have also struggled with myself. I don't always want to go out, right? I don't always want to meet up, right? I don't always want to hang out like 2 or 3 hours beyond my shift building relationships, but that's a part of the game. People want to trust us, right? And in
Hmm.
order to trust us, they want to interact with us outside of the environment that we all are familiar with. And so I only bring that up to say I think a lot of times, yes, the network is at play because people buy from people they know, like,
Like
and
and
trust,
trust.
right? And people also
Yeah.
promote and partner with people they know,
No,
like,
like
and
and
trust. And
trust.
sometimes we have to go outside of our normal box, right,
Hmm.
to build the trust factor, the know factor, the like factor. And so, yes, that network is always at play, but I think you're right. Most people still, right now, don't understand sponsorship.
Yeah, and I think a lot of
Right now.
times too is you don't look for a sponsor when you need them. That's
Yes.
a relationship you're growing and growing and growing. I was very interested in different aspects of technology all the time because my curiosity just precedes me. But for me, it was like, okay, so let me start going to different things internally at work just to learn about these different things that are happening. And, luckily for us in the tech space, it changes so much and so often that you can be on the next round and just jump on that train and be like, all right, I'm
Yeah.
going to get in on this ride, right?
Yeah.
And try to understand this phenomena of what's happening in this particular space, right? Because things change. It's like right now, as we change,
Uh,
there's going to be a new phone, a new this, a new that, a new
yeah.
technology.
Yeah.
AI is really taking off, so it's automating a lot of things. We're seeing a lot of new things coming out of that space. So when we go even to McDonald's or we go to a store, everything is auto, like you pay on your way out or on your way in, that type of thing. It's like
Yeah.
you don't even deal with people anymore. So now that socialization is almost disappearing. Like when you go and park your car, it's like literally it's a machine. It's everything is so machine
Digitized.
driven that
Absolutely.
you're like the people skills is like dying. It literally is because you're not put in a predicament where you get to actually speak to another person. So I feel, and
Customer
then with the
service.
pandemic too, like
Yeah.
it's people have to learn to play nice in the sandbox again. It's literally so you're looking at that and you're like, wow, like people are taking things a lot more personal than they used to. Just their mental state is not where it used to be just because their insecurities have come in and and not being
Isolation.
in front of a person,
Isolation. Yeah.
they come in that the insecurity kicks in and you're like, wow, like that's not even what I meant, but okay. People, misdirecting comments or questions or anything, and they're taking it personal more than they would have in the past. And just we've had a lot of changes in that space where I honestly think we've lost a lot of those skill sets, and
No,
now
we
we're gonna have
absolutely
to
have.
try to get some of it back.
We have soft skills, empathy, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just compassion for one another. We absolutely
Mm-hmm.
have lost it. A little while ago, you mentioned that you left the capacity and that you didn't leave really the company, you left the boss. And I thought that was an interesting statement because it's true. People do not quit organizations, people quit their bosses because of a lack of support, right? And
Yeah.
so, bringing back and closing out, I think the whole conversation around sponsorship. Understand, my friends, if you want to fast track your career, you need someone to hold your hand. A leader talks to you, a mentor talks with you,
Mm-hmm.
a sponsor talks for you.
Mm-hmm.
You said it, right? A sponsor is someone who's going to go in the room and amplify. You like that word because you
Yeah.
amplify voices, right? Your sponsor is going to amplify your voice and speak to people in places that you can't. But before someone will sponsor you, they have to know you.
Yeah.
They have to know you. You have to be credible. You have to be legitimate. You have to be honest. You have to be trustworthy. And you got to be able to take action. Because I'm never going to refer someone for a position that I don't think they're qualified for, that they're not going to be a rock star in, right? So
Yeah.
focus on your allies, your mentors, and your sponsors. DoraMaria, what's your greatest strength?
I'm a connector. I'm a catalyst. I can connect
Yes,
people,
you are.
and I could see the magic happening, right? So for me, it's more of, when I see greatness happening, I do that even at work. Like I'm like, oh my goodness, you're great. Like that was amazing. Like, and I try to make sure that that person, like they know, like, hey, the work you're doing is awesome. Like, don't let, because I don't know what's going on in their world, but if I just look at my own experience where I wasn't really acknowledged for the work I was doing, it was almost like I was this invisible person that just did the work, and it just was like magic. It was, the work was done. I'm like, you know what? This person should get that. They should know that they're great. Like, I want to make sure, like, if you see somebody that is doing amazing work, don't wait till they keel over and you're at the
Yeah,
wake.
yeah.
No, like say it now.
Please
Say it
don't
when they're
wait.
alive. Like, you know
You
what
have
I
to wait.
mean? Don't wait for the wake. I'm like, don't be bringing me flowers at my wake. Like, appreciate me now that I'm alive, kicking and alive, right? So,
I
like,
think
no,
that's
no,
so
no.
important. I think
Yeah,
everyone wants to be recognized
yeah.
for their
And
effort.
seen, just
Everyone
seen.
wants to feel seen. People see this is people say, "I'm okay. It's all right. I don't need it."
But
Lies,
it's not.
lies. Everybody wants to be recognized
Yeah.
in one way, shape, or form. I'll tell you something that still boggles my mind today, specifically in sales environments. And I lead sales environments, service environments, I lead leaders. But the one thing that still floors me today in the area of recognition is what a balloon does for a grown person.
I'm serious. It's those little things, but they matter because
They
you're
matter.
feeling seen. You're feeling
Yes,
seen. You're being valued, and that just makes you want to work up to par. Like,
yes,
I can't slack off today, man. I got a balloon yesterday. You know what I mean? Like, I was acknowledged, and I was acknowledged in front of my peers. So just think about that, and then think about when the opposite happens, when someone says something and it's in front of your peers, you feel
yeah,
also just as bad. So you want to make sure that when those things are happening,
that's
it's
right.
your peers, you're being recognized in front of your peers. And now that we're in this hybrid space, like it's a little bit more challenging to get to know people and understand them, and get what their true intentions are. But you have to, I don't know, I guess I was jaded when I was young. My mom always thought everyone was amazing. Like everyone deserved to be treated with kindness. We're all human beings. We all
Yeah,
start there.
yeah,
And that's the way I've grown up. So when I deal with anyone, you have to stab me for like the 8th time for me to figure it out. Like, oh, you're not a nice person. Let me stay away from you. But for me, it was, I'm focused on you're awesome because you're a human being. Like, I don't need to have any other proof until you prove me wrong. And some people, they work hard at proving you wrong and you just don't register it. But
Yeah.
you have to make an assessment of who do you have around you? Are they lifting you up or are they pulling you down?
Yes.
And once you figure that out, then you know who to hang out with. And I'm not saying delete people because, like computer things, you can delete things, and you can't do that with people necessarily. But at least look at people and say, okay, you know what? I'm going to spend 10 minutes with those people and focus the 45 minutes on these people. These
Yes.
people are my jam. They're going to light my fire up higher and they're going to make me think a little bit better. And there's just people like you can brainstorm with people better. Just all of those energies come together and they put you in and propel you where the other, negative space that just brings you down. And
Yeah.
so why not proactively get yourself out of that situation? So.
And you do have to be proactive. You have to make a decision, just like the decision that you made. This isn't working for me anymore, right? I think sometimes we stay in situations way long, right? And we're doing damage to ourselves. You describe yourself as an inclusive technologist. What does that mean?
That means that I include everybody. I don't care that you didn't study engineering. I don't care that you were in a different major. The engineering space has been, such a broad spectrum of all things technology that anybody can really, it's never too late to jump on board and work in the technology space. And I always make fun of like people who are like, oh, I'm only in this field. I'm like, yeah, do you use a computer? You're a technologist, because everything now is computerized. Everything, your research that you do for work, even if you work in a supermarket, you have to touch buttons. You have to figure out some technology to work there. So everyone's a technologist. We're in this digital era that no one could be left behind. So I want to make sure that everyone has access to that. I understand that there's disabilities, but there's ways to work around that. You know what? If you are blind, there's readers that read things to you and you can navigate that space. If you're deaf, there's things that you can read. There's texting technology, right? There's so many things that could really help people. It doesn't matter where they are at, but we can meet them where they are and help them to like really move and move mountains, right? Like they can really move in this space. And this is a field that I think is open to everyone. It doesn't matter if you're a human being and you can press a button, you're good to go. Like you can really work in this space in some way, shape, or form. So
why technology? Why did you decide to become an engineer in this particular space?
You know what? When I was growing up, I just was the gadget girl, like literally. And as I progressed, math was always I got skipped in math in high school and everything. That was a subject that I just really just enjoyed. I just found it so much fun. And I could see patterns when people were just thinking I would have the answer. I'm like, oh, maybe I don't have the answer. And the teacher would call at me and I had the answer. So everything was in my mind. And a few times I had a few teachers that were like, oh, you have to prove your work. And so I would, I go and I, do the work, and they still couldn't believe that I had gotten the answer. And just because I didn't do it the way that they did it, they were just like, well, that's wrong. I'm like, no, that's not really wrong because your answer is this. And I would prove them. I would do proofs to prove my teacher wrong half the time. It was really comical. She goes, you're following that, but that's really not true. Like, this is the way that it's like, it shows all of my work. Well, here you're skipping a process. And she would just like, so yeah, I with that one teacher I almost thought I was going to give up on math on that year. And that was like in 4th grade. But other than that, like I'm a person that just really loves the math. Like I really enjoyed that. And I like science except for bio. I found biology so gross. And when we had to dissect things in lab, I just wanted to like die. I had a deal with my lab group that I would do their lab books, and I had color pencils. I had like the best lab books, but I did everyone's lab books so that I didn't have to touch it. And the teacher caught on and she was like coming over. And I was like, oh man, she's going to make me touch the dead thing. Oh my goodness. And I took like 5 sticks and I was like this and this and this is where you, because she asked me for the spleen of all things, and it's like under the stomach or something, and you can tell how traumatic it was, and I still remember that. But I was like, that's the spleen right there, because I'm not touching it. It was just so gross. That's one aspect. I knew I was not going to be a nurse. And I may tell you, my dad would tell me, oh, that's a man's job, and I would tell him, because he wanted me to be a nurse or something, and I was just like, I don't tolerate the look of my own blood. That's not going to be the field I'm going into. Like, I pass out when I see blood. I'm like, I cannot. Someone's life is going to be hanging on a thread and I'm going to be passing out. I'm like, no, that's not my field. So,
what's interesting is that we share some commonalities there. I thought until I was about 19, 20 years old that I would go off to medical school, become an MD. I registered in a surgical assistant program at Eastern Virginia Medical School. That's in Norfolk, Virginia. Dr. L.D. Britt. Okay, I remember it like it was yesterday. Dr. L.D. Britt, the first Black neurosurgeon in America. He was the chief surgeon, and I was in his space, and he looked me dead in my eye and said, "Son, before you enter this program, I think you need to come with me and observe a couple of operations."
No.
He saw something in me that I did not see.
Yeah.
He saw this kid cannot handle all this gore. He had to see it because I witnessed a rectal duct replacement and a brain surgery.
Oh,
I mean, skull back. Listen, you
is this
say
your Halloween edition?
Freak show, DoraMaria. I had no idea that I didn't like blood and gore. I had no idea. And I almost fell out in the operating room, almost threw up in another part of the, listen, no surgical assistant programs for me.
And when you look at technology, nothing's bleeding. You take things apart, there's no bleeding involved. Yeah.
And that's why I also like this telecom space. Right?
There will be no Halloween edition in this space.
Listen, you are super big on family and community. You're an engineer, a technologist, but you're also like a bona fide leader, a coach, a mentor. Why is mentorship, specifically working with youth, so important to you? Because it's extremely important to me as well.
Well, there were two things. One, I come from a large family. I was one of the first people to go to college. I am mentoring uncles and aunts that came to this country because I'm one of the first ones to finish high school, start college, etc. And I said, wow, this is crazy. How many families are going through this? And the second piece was I ran into someone who was 29 years old when I was in college. She's like, oh my goodness, I'm a grandma. And I'm very good at math. And the math did not make sense. The math did not make sense. I was just like, how is this math? I don't even want to think. That's how scared I was. I was like, wow, how scary is that? And I was just like, wow, someone's a grandma in their 20s. So that's kids raising kids, raising kids, raising kids.
That's not good.
And when you're in an environment where kids are raising kids, you don't have a lot of maturity in there. There's a lot of reactionary things, not preventative things. Yeah. And so you also don't have the maturity of relationships. And that was something that I felt was like, wow, like this kid is feeling like nobody loves him. And they love coming to after school because they feel seen, heard, and loved. I was like, wow, we need to change that. Yeah. And I started doing more things after school, and I started doing activities. I did some through the community board. I do things through other programs. A lot of the things I've done have been through the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. I also volunteer a lot with NSBE because they do a lot of things when it comes to youth. and they go into the high schools and the middle schools, and they, they do science days, they do, different types of STEM activities. They get the kids involved and excited. And the kids, even if they don't care about getting into the tech space, they care about playing with a friend, and they'll come along just because they're playing with a friend. They'll come and do the activity. When I do the science festival in DC, I've done it every year. The family comes and the kids are so excited, and they go in to get their parents. They're like, look what I can do. And literally it was building these rockets, which we only did like the first year because we thought, we'll just do the rockets. But we were getting in trouble because the kids would launch the rockets and the rockets would be going to everybody else's booth all over. I would have to like follow the rocket. After a while, it was just like, we got to the end of the second day and we were just like, no more rockets. And the next year people were just like, bring the rockets. And when we got the table, we had all the like origami out. The kids were like, man, we really want the rockets. And we had the rocket stuff there. We ended up doing the rockets again. And for years, we've been doing literally the rocket launches because these kids are just excited and they feel like, wow, this is incredible. I built that. And then they get to see it launch and just that feeling of success, right? Why not give that to a kid when they're young so that they feel seen, loved, heard, and that they see that they're accomplishing something miraculous, right? Something flying. And I don't know, just that smile on those faces to me makes a world of a difference. And I feel like if we can make impacts on these young minds at a young age, then guess what? They'll make better decisions. Not only that, they'll treat people around them better. There'll be less bullying. Like all of these things that, like, I lived through some of that in my life. Like I've had to deal with bullies. I'm a short person. I still am, but I was a short person in school. I was always like, if I wasn't the shortest, I was the second person because it was just that's how short I was. And so I was an easy target for like anyone in the class that wanted to be annoying that day. And so I had this one person that just bullied me through second, third, fourth, fifth grade, and sixth grade. Thank the Lord Jesus, I was put in another class and not in the same class as this girl. But it was just like, she was just always taller, bigger than me. She would push me out of the way. She would like, just because she could, not because of anything else. And I just in my mind said, you know what? Something must be. And again, I grew up with my mom would always be like, you don't know if her parents are really mean in her house. And then I would turn around. I'm like, well, y'all aren't mean because y'all are strict. And so it would be like one of those things where I was just like, Mom, she's just a mean person. Well, you don't know what they're going through. They might be going through a rough time.
Mom's
like,
kindness.
all right, Mom. All
Mom's
right. And it's like, lead with kindness, Mom. All right, Mom, I'll do it. But even now at work, people will do things that are truly disrespectful to me. Like they'll say things like, oh, wow, you speak English really well. Like, just always discounting, like anything. And I'm just like, and then I tend to like quiet down because I'm like, I make up words in English and Spanish. I'm an equal opportunity maker-upper of words. And so now it becomes like, okay, so that's how I got started with Toastmasters to really just help build my skill set because I wasn't very confident in speaking. And then I'm like, did this person say it because they were trying to be kind or they were saying it to be mean? And so, after a while, somebody had said to me, oh my goodness, you're an anchor baby for your family. And I thought that was an incredible compliment, right? I was like, oh my goodness, yes. Like I'm one of these strong people. I'm like one of the first people to finish college. And, it's like my generation really of the kids in my family and whatever. And my friend took me aside and was like, no. And I'm like, what? And then they're like, they're saying that you're here illegally. And I was like, what? I was just like, anchor baby, get it? I'm like, no.
In context like you.
Exactly. So I was just like, oh, wow. What? So I don't even know how many people said things to me in a mean way. And I took it in the best way possible because that's how I'm wired to think.
I never heard that before.
And I was just like, wow. Yeah, I didn't register that one. But it was, again, just navigating that space where it's like, I only figured that out because I had mentors that I went to and I spoke to. And I said, you know what? We need to make sure that we're mentors for that younger generation so that they don't have these surprises when they're like where we're at. They should be well more advanced, well more knowledgeable, I guess, assessed of the environment they're in so that they don't get told things that insult them and they take it as a compliment like I did. But, at the end of the day, too, that they're more mindful of who's around them as well. To learn and to grow from that.
I really appreciate the the transparency in this conversation. I'm learning more and more about you during this conversation. One thing that you just mentioned just made me reflect. Like, if you could write yourself a younger letter, if you could write your younger self a letter, like what would the topic of that letter be? Because you have had some interesting experiences.
For me, honestly, I would just write in big bold letters like, you're going to be okay. Like, you're going to make it through this. I lost my mom in college, and I just felt like life was unfair. I'd go to churches to fight with God. I'd point out people he should have taken. Like, that woman is 98 years old, plenty of life lived. Bags are packed. You could have taken her. Or that woman, she looks like she's 150 and she's ready to go. She's here on overtime. And so I would justify, like, I don't even know why in my mind I thought that would bring my mom back, but I just felt better going and arguing this point. And it took me a while to accept that she was gone. Like, she was
Yeah,
my rock, my biggest cheerleader.
yeah,
And for me, it was just like, after that, it was just like, you know what, my mom's sacrifice and her journey in life cannot be in vain. The fact
yeah,
that she came here and learned English and all of these things, like, she went through a lot. Like, she did it because she wanted me to have a better life, and it's up to me to make sure that I leave that imprint in this world. And that's what got me out of that. But other kids that go through that or go through challenging things may or may not have the strength and the wherewithal to pick up their bootstraps and say, let's keep going. Let's there's a life out there that needs to be lived. Let's do it right. And for me, it's like, you know what? I need to make sure that this younger generation knows that they're seen, loved, and cared for, and that they start living that life on that level so
yeah.
that we can have I have to build a community I want to see, right? Like, I think it's Gandhi
That's
that
right.
says you have to build the world you want to see, right?
That's
So
right.
I want to build that community around me. If I want to see youth that's awesome and amazing and growing up to be amazing adults, then I have to make sure I'm part of making that happen. So.
Totally agree. I am sold out for making sure that I can pay it forward, right?
Yeah.
And you take that very seriously. You mentioned Toastmasters, and you hold a capacity within Toastmasters, correct?
Yeah.
And I know people have heard of Toastmasters. Some people have no idea what Toastmasters is. Can you share just a little bit? Because it is very helpful for those who are petrified to speak in public. Go for it.
All right. So Toastmasters is a nonprofit organization that literally exists to help people build their communication skills that innately also builds your leadership skills to manage that conversation, right? And I'm one of those people that sat outside the room. Like, I would go to Toastmaster meetings to hear it from the outside because I was scared to even come in. And when I did come in, I sat in the back hiding behind a tall person so that I wouldn't even be seen from the front, right?
Right. Don't ask me
And
no questions.
exactly, it was just like, oh man, don't call on me. But after a while, it was like you started doing little things and getting more comfortable and getting involved. And then I, became an officer, a club coach, and then little by little, I took 10 years to get my DTM done, which is Distinguished Toastmaster, and I literally got it in February of 2020. I was super stoked because that year it was supposed to be in Paris. I was dying to go down in Paris with my pin, and it didn't happen because of COVID. So I'm like, darn it. And let me tell you, it was an accomplishment, but it's a muscle that you always have to work at. Like, you always have to work at it so that you can be confident, and it's like a muscle. And when you don't practice it, your insecurities start coming back in. And I just really feel like we can definitely do a lot in that space. Right now, I'm the program quality director for District 46 in New York. But for me, it was more of pushing myself to do. I'm an introvert, so I'm very uncomfortable in that role. I go to meetings and people are wanting to talk to me. I'm like, okay, hi. And so I have to like get my strength up. Like, again, like, okay, I'm going to be around people. Like, my energy needs to be on high before I go into this meeting, because by the time I finish this meeting, it's going to be low. And it's just, you spend a lot of energy when you're an introvert. That's when you know you're really an introvert. And I need to flex that muscle. I need to put myself in uncomfortable situations so that I can, start letting go of that introvertness. Like, I'm one of these chameleons where I can be an extrovert for a little bit, and then I go back to being an introvert, that kind of thing. And so it's helped me to do that. And by taking different roles and positions within, the club, you end up building your leadership skills also along the way. So people should definitely look for a club near them. Like there's clubs in universities. We're trying to push for speech craft activities with high schools, just to get younger kids comfortable with public speaking, because believe me, when I was in high school, I would beg the teacher I would write you a 20,000 page paper rather than speaking and presenting in front of the class. Like that was like the bartering like that I would go through in high school. And it was hard. Like, for the few times that I had to present, I thought I was going to die. And then the teacher would, after the thing, she was, but did you die? I'm like, no, but I came so close to like not being here on this planet. Oh my Lord. But yeah.
DoraMaria, this has been great. Listen, as we wind this down, right, I think about young girls who have tons of vision, tons of potential, tons of greatness deep down on the inside, but they aren't aware of that greatness. They aren't confident in that greatness. What advice do you have for them?
Honestly, like, work at it every single day, because it's there. And if you can't see it for yourself, find someone that can mentor you. And it may not be people in your direct circle. Like it could be someone outside of your circle. So just keep that in mind as well. Sometimes we limit ourselves to, I talked to like the neighbor's kid or something like that. And, it doesn't necessarily have to be someone that's like in your direct circle. So keep that in mind. Be open-minded about, connecting with people. Talk to your parents. Let them know what you're up to. Like, oh, mom or dad, or hey, family, like this is what I'm trying to do and navigate this space. And, for me, like I had my parents through high school and middle school. Some kids don't. And so they lose momentum because of that. Don't let that be like when my mom passed away. I'm like, I'm not going to be defined by that. I'm not going to be that kid defined like, oh yeah, that's that kid. Her mom died. No, I'm going to be known for something else. Like I'm not going to be defined by the circumstances that life throws at me. So I need to make sure that I'm putting myself in a space where I can, not that I forget about it, because you don't forget, but that you can deal with it in a more mature level as well, and kind of navigate that space a little bit more positively and a little bit more maturely. And hopefully, these young ladies see that, this is who I want to be. How do I get there? Let's start working at it. What are the steps that I need to do to get where I want to be, and start working backwards from there? Like, hey, if I want to be X, well, what do I need to get there? Well, I need to do this. I need to do this. I need to do this. Well, how do I get these things done? I need materials, I need mentorship, I need education, or I need skill sets. Let me start working on those things. And then identifying people that will help you get there. There's people that are willing to be your mentor. And, for me, when you're a young person, go to your guidance counselor, find out like, hey, can you start a mentorship program? Can you invite people here to have a mentorship day where we can do round robin? And it could be very informal, but you can get to meet people that are willing to help you through your path and your journey.
Connect with the resources that you have. Leverage the heck out of them. Build relationships. Acquire allies. Acquire a mentor. Acquire a sponsor. Right? DoraMaria, you are a freaking rock star. You're a clubhouse ninja, and I am proud to call you my friend. Dear, please help people understand how they can follow you and how they can connect and learn more.
Okay, so my handle on most social media is just DM Abreu. So it's DMABREU. And they can definitely follow me there. Twitter and Instagram are my most popular ones, or on Clubhouse. You can definitely join us. Breakfast with Champions. We have with champions, because we're all champions in our own right. And hopefully coming together as a community, we're going to learn from one another. We're going to fellowship together. And hey, you'll probably find a mentor or two there in that bunch, so that can definitely help catapult you to your next level as well. So join us.
Absolutely. They're all there. Come join us at the largest breakfast table in the world, where you will absolutely be seen and heard. Which is extremely important. DoraMaria, so gracious for your time, my friend.
Thank you, TM, for having me. I appreciate the invite.
Thank you so much. See you soon.
All right.